Welcome to the Sightseer progress video covering March 2018. I'm Neil, one of the developers, and here's what we worked on. In February, I mentioned that we'd be working on replacing the train engine, but that idea was scrapped shortly after I made the last video. We will get to it eventually, it just got moved down the to-do list. A lot of work was done to make Steam connections work properly. Right-clicking on the player's name and selecting Join Game on the Steam Friends list will now let you play with friends. The mod manager will now let you connect to any server if the only mod you're using is a new language. The firing range of defensive turrets has been increased. A new server option has been added to prevent base capture within the first 2 hours of the declaration of war. Outposts now remember which faction discovered them, enabling all faction members to see it on their maps. Wordless tutorials have been added to the beginning of the game. Sending trade offers with a value of 0 is no longer possible. They are automatically removed when the offer is sent. Selecting different resources in the trade agreement window now immediately updates the volume. Minimizing the tutorial window no longer breaks the window. It's now possible to kick, promote, and demote faction members that are offline. Fixed an issue with the plasma weaponry where the left barrel would fire from the right side and the right barrel from the left side. The radar now shows liquid, solid, and gas icons instead of just a resource icon. Resource nodes are now discovered by players, not factions. Players are now properly awarded credits for discovering them the first time. You can no longer be awarded credits for discovering resources if you don't belong to a faction. This stops people from logging in over and over collecting money. When choosing your starting position, a preview window showing the train difficulty level is now displayed before you accept. At the same time, you can optionally turn off the tutorials. A bug that allowed non-faction players to attack bases has been fixed. Data serialization bugs which occurred when you dropped inventory items and picked them back up again have been fixed. It's now possible to end wars with a faction even if the faction's members are all offline. /faction is a new command which lists all the faction members and war states. The list also shows who invited members and when. For people with crappy computers, you can now turn off the weather particle effects in the options window. The grass can now be bent by vehicles either with their wheels or turbines. Turbines will also affect leaves on trees. Entering combat will now completely negate any stealth technology that is being used. The mining beam will no longer be considered combat suitable by the AI. Flyers with mining weapons will now run when attacked. The radiation calculation was broken and outposts would completely cancel out background radiation. This has been fixed. Outposts can now attack players who don't belong to a faction if they steal from them. UFOs will no longer use the radiation damage type. The gamma turret has been converted to an ion turret and uses electricity as its damage type. Radiation is now going to be reserved to auras that damage everyone indiscriminately. Tooltips have been reworked to make them easier to read. Restricted outposts will no longer attack non-player factions and non-affiliated players. Aggro has been adjusted when stealing or attacking any base units. It now effectively declares a temporary war between the two factions, making all vehicles hostile towards each other. The repair option now only uses hard metal, making it easier to recover your vehicle after a battle. It also has the bonus side effect of letting you swap vehicle parts because the parts are no longer used to determine what materials are needed for the repairs. Go-to based off the player name will now work even if the player has a space in the name. Wind turbines, solar panels, and geothermal generators will now properly show up in the resources summary screen. Choosing to capture an outpost will no longer reset its existing capture progress. We fixed a bug, which would sometimes make players unable to leave combat without disconnecting from the server. Missiles now have basic heat tracking, making missile launchers without a combat computer more effective. The tracking kicks in when the missile is roughly 1 second away from a nearby enemy, but the enemy may not be the intended target. UFOs will no longer become a member of the player's faction if the faction happened to be created when a UFO was nearby. Items now have quality tiers that show up as colored outlines in your inventory. They can be found by wandering the world and happening across them or by attacking NPCs. Non-affiliated players can no longer damage buildings without first entering combat. Small defensive turrets now have built-in passive sensors and no longer require a radar tower nearby to see their enemies. Defensive turrets will no longer drain power while inactive. If an enemy attacks the base, then they will turn on and start drawing power. Silicon is now treated as an abundant resource in the same way that gravel is, but now it's found in smaller quantities and biased towards hot and dry climates. Gravel amounts now vary depending on biome type. The amount of gravel you can mine in flat biomes is now drastically lower than it was in the mountains. And finally, we added NPC outposts to the world. Some are neutral, some are hostile. You'll have to explore and find them yourself. We hope you like them. And that covers the month of March.